Now, you may have noticed that every now and then a little think tank gets a free ride in the papers, way of filling the pages with graphics and pictures about a dream utopia, and the Grattan Institute came up with one for Melbourne, which was to essentially charge poor people from coming into the city to dissuade them from doing so. Well, of course, it's all about the environment. It's all about making sure that people use more public transport and we cut back on cars. But if the effect is it's going to be more expensive to drive your car in, it means poor people won't drive their cars in. That's just for rich people or people whose cars are paid for by the taxpayer or the ratepayer. Have a look. In the AFR, modelling by the Institute suggests that charging motorists to enter Sydney and Melbourne CBDs would reduce traffic by 40% in the morning peak, improve speeds by 16% within the CBD and 20% on the main roads leading into it. Well, Mark, poor people aren't welcome in the city, according to the Grattan Institute.
Well, Paul, it's the perpetual headline, the congestion charge on traffic. We've been reading these reports and the headlines associated with them for 30 years now, and no government's ever done it for the reason it's inequitable. It's kind of political suicide, and all you've got really are tollways. The toll roads in major cities are a de facto congestion charge. The notion if you pay more, you get an easier run. But Sydney is so crowded, of course, you can pay on the M5, the M2, the M4 and so forth and still sit there in a traffic jam like a car park. So even that hasn't worked for people. No government's ever going to do this. Think tanks should use their scarce resources for more productive means, solve the energy policy problems, solve the problems of Australia's education system, put your resources in there. No government's ever going to do this inner city congestion tax. It's never going to fly. So move on to other subjects that are more productive.
I can see everyone packing up around you, so I'll let you go, Mark. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, mate. We'll talk again next week. Thank you, great man.
Thanks, Paul. All the best.
See you later. Mark Latham, One Nation leader in New South Wales, but let's keep going with Tina and Robbo. What about my contention here? I mean, if they're trying to say that it's about making it more expensive, it's about dissuading people from driving in. They're going to say it's about public transport, all the rest of it here. But it, of course, means if you're a state MP and somebody pays for you already to have a nice little spot, you're going to... What do you care? If you're the Lord Mayor of Melbourne, you've got a chauffeur.
Well, in defence of those state MPs on all sides, they pay for their parking for the pleasure of being able to park in Parliament House. They don't get it for free.
Fair enough.
But look, there are places that this has happened. I mean, Singapore, London, they do have these sorts of congestion charges that are put in place. I think in Singapore at one point they actually doubled your registration if you drove your car into the city, and Singaporeans, being Singaporeans, went up yours and paid and kept driving. But some places have tried this. I mean, in reality, Sydney's so far off, and I think Melbourne to a certain extent, and Brisbane as well. Some of these cities like Singapore and London have at least got a half-decent transport system.
Well, that's the point.
We don't have that. And I mean, despite, you can argue about all the work that's going on, and this isn't having a crack. I think both sides have failed miserably when it comes to public transport across the country. Until you get to the point where you've got a genuine, viable alternate option, we shouldn't even be talking about this stuff. Sure, when you've built the public transport system that works efficiently, works effectively, doesn't cost an arm and a leg, and is reliable, let's have that conversation. But until we get to that point, shove it back in the drawer and pull it out maybe in 30 or 40 years' time, because that's how long it's going to take to get a decent public transport system.
And look, the truth is this story comes up about 6 times a year, and I'm biting down on it, but because I thought about it from the idea of all of this stuff too, is that you can't say, well, they do it in London, they do it in New York, where they've got the tube and they've got the subway, and, different places people live and all the rest of it. But also, what really annoys me about this is if you're somebody who has to work in the city, and by that I mean somebody who has to deliver paper cups, it costs you more to do your job, which means the stuff that you are selling has to go for more. That's the flow-on effect of all of these things. So I always think that these organisations, they never quite think all of that through.
Well, Paul, what about the pensioners that have to visit a lot of the specialists and doctors in that area that can't walk, that have to be dropped up, and I'm thinking primarily of my mother. Sorry, Mum, but I know how difficult it is when she sees her eye specialist and heart specialist and everything. You have to park right out the front. No, you can't do that. As Mark said, it's not going to happen. But there's so few streets you can drive in the city now. I mean, George Street's gone. It's... very few areas you could actually drive in Sydney.
Correct.